My sister borrowed my identity to get a loan, so I used hers to ruin her credit and steal her boyfriend. Everything started falling apart when I discovered those credit card statements in my mailbox that I never applied for. The moment I saw my name on accounts I'd never opened, my stomach dropped like I was on a roller coaster. My hands were shaking as I opened envelope after envelope, each one revealing another piece of financial devastation that someone had created using my identity. The amounts were staggering and made me feel sick to my core. Thousands of dollars in debt that I never accumulated, interest rates that would take me years to pay off, and late fees piling up like snow in a blizzard. My credit score had plummeted from excellent to terrible in just a few months, and I had no idea how this nightmare had begun. I spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering who could have done this to me. The thought that someone close to me might be responsible felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Every person I trusted became a suspect in my mind, and paranoia started consuming my thoughts like a disease spreading through my brain. My sister had always been the golden child in our family, the one who could do no wrong in everyone's eyes. She was charming and beautiful, always getting what she wanted with a smile and a laugh that could melt hearts. People naturally gravitated toward her like moths to a flame, and she used that power to manipulate situations to her advantage without anyone noticing her true nature. When I confronted her about the strange packages arriving at our parents' house addressed to me, she brushed off my concerns with casual indifference. She claimed she had no idea what I was talking about, but something in her eyes told a different story entirely. The way she avoided eye contact and changed the subject too quickly made my suspicions grow stronger with each passing day. I decided to do some detective work of my own, starting with checking my credit report more thoroughly than I ever had before. What I found made my blood run cold, and my hands tremble with rage that I had never experienced in my entire life. Not only had someone opened multiple credit cards in my name, but they had also taken out a personal loan for $15,000. The loan application had been submitted online, and the money had been transferred to a bank account that I didn't recognize. Every detail on the application was correct, from my social security number to my mother's maiden name and even my childhood pet's name. Only someone very close to me would have access to all this deeply personal information that I had shared over the years. My sister's behavior became increasingly suspicious as I dug deeper into the mystery surrounding my stolen identity. She suddenly had new clothes that looked expensive, jewelry that sparkled like diamonds, and was taking weekend trips that she claimed were paid for by her new boyfriend. The timing was too convenient, and my gut feeling told me she was the one responsible for my financial ruin and emotional turmoil. I followed her one evening when she said she was going to work late at her usual location. Instead of going to her workplace, she drove to a fancy restaurant downtown where she met with some man I'd never seen before. They were laughing and drinking expensive wine, and she paid the bill with a credit card that looked suspiciously new and shiny. The next morning, I went through her room while she was out, feeling guilty but desperate for answers to my questions. Hidden in her jewelry box, beneath layers of necklaces and earrings, I found copies of my personal documents, including my birth certificate and social security card. My heart pounded as I realized the betrayal was even worse than I had imagined in my darkest nightmares. Confronting her directly seemed pointless, since she was such a skilled liar and manipulator who could talk her way out of anything. I needed concrete proof before I could take any action, so I decided to gather more evidence of her crimes. I set up a small recording device in the living room where she often made phone calls, hoping to catch her in a compromising conversation. What I heard a few days later made my blood boil and my hands shake with fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. She was talking to someone about making another purchase using my identity, laughing about how easy it had been to fool the credit card companies. She even joked about how clueless I was and how long it had taken me to notice the obvious signs of identity theft. Instead of immediately confronting her or calling the police like any normal person would do, I decided to get revenge in a way that would teach her a lesson. If she wanted to play games with identity theft, then I would show her how it felt to be on the receiving end. I had access to all her personal information, just as easily as she had access to mine through our shared family history. I started small, signing her up for magazine subscriptions and mailing lists that would flood her mailbox with junk mail for months. Then I moved on to more serious things, like applying for credit cards in her name and making small purchases that would hurt her credit score. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction watching her confusion grow as her financial life became increasingly complicated and messy. The real game changer came when I discovered that her new boyfriend was actually married with 2 kids and a dog. She had been bragging about him constantly, talking about how successful and wonderful he was and how he was going to change her life. I did some research online and found his social media profiles, which clearly showed his family life with photos of birthday parties and vacations. I knew this information would devastate her, but I also saw an opportunity for the ultimate revenge that would hurt her heart. If she wanted to steal my identity and ruin my life, then I would steal something precious from her emotional world. I decided to reach out to her boyfriend and tell him some carefully crafted lies about my sister that would make him question everything. I created a fake social media profile using her information and started messaging him, pretending to be someone who knew about his affair. I told him that my sister had been bragging about sleeping with a married man and that she was planning to contact his wife. I made it sound like she was dangerous and unstable, someone who would ruin his marriage and family life if he continued seeing her. The plan worked better than I had hoped, and within a week, he had completely cut off contact with her without explanation. She was devastated and couldn't understand why he had suddenly disappeared from her life like a ghost. I watched her cry and felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt that made my emotions feel like a tornado spinning out of control. But my revenge didn't stop there, because I wanted her to experience the same financial stress she had caused me to endure. I applied for several more credit cards in her name and made larger purchases, including expensive electronics and jewelry that would max out her credit limits. I was careful to use different addresses and phone numbers to avoid detection by the credit card companies and their fraud prevention systems. I also signed her up for several subscription services and gym memberships that would automatically charge her bank account every month without her knowledge. The goal was to create a web of financial obligations that would be difficult for her to untangle and understand. I wanted her to feel the same panic and helplessness that I had experienced when I first discovered my identity had been stolen. As the weeks passed, I could see the stress taking its toll on her physical and mental health in ways that were both satisfying and concerning. She was losing weight, not sleeping well, and constantly checking her bank account and credit reports like an obsessed person. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a bigger part of me felt justified in my actions because she had started this whole mess. The situation escalated when she started receiving calls from debt collectors and credit card companies at all hours of the day. She would answer the phone with confusion and anger, insisting that she had never applied for these accounts or made these purchases. I had to hide my smirk as I listened to her protests and denials from the next room, knowing that I was responsible for her suffering. She eventually figured out that someone was using her identity, just as I had discovered months earlier in my own financial nightmare. The irony wasn't lost on me as I watched her go through the same investigative process that I had gone through. She was frantically trying to figure out who had access to her personal information and how they had managed to steal her identity so completely. I knew I was taking a huge risk, but I couldn't resist dropping subtle hints about my involvement in her problems. I would make comments about karma and how people who steal identities deserve to have their own stolen in return. She would give me strange looks, but she never directly accused me of anything because she was too focused on her own problems. The breaking point came when she discovered that someone had used her identity to apply for a loan that had been rejected due to her damaged credit score. She was planning to buy a car and needed financing, but her credit was now too poor to qualify for anything decent. The reality of her situation finally hit her like a brick wall, and she realized that her financial future was in serious jeopardy. I watched her break down in tears as she realized that her financial future was in ruins and might take years to repair. She had no idea how long it would take to restore her credit or how much money she would need to pay off the debts that had been created in her name. The weight of her situation was crushing her spirit, and I could see the desperation in her eyes as she tried to figure out what to do next. That's when I decided to reveal the truth about what I had done and why I had done it to her. I sat her down and calmly explained that I knew about her identity theft and that everything she was experiencing was payback for her actions. I told her about the evidence I had gathered and how I had orchestrated her financial downfall as revenge for what she had done to me. Her reaction was exactly what I expected: anger, denial, and then eventual acceptance of her guilt when faced with the evidence. She tried to justify her actions by claiming that she had been desperate and that she had planned to pay me back eventually. But her excuses fell on deaf ears because the damage had already been done to both of our lives and our relationship as sisters. I gave her a choice that would determine the future of our relationship. She could either help me restore my credit and pay back all the money she had stolen, or I could take all my evidence to the police and press charges. I also told her that if she wanted her boyfriend back, she would have to come clean about everything to him and face the consequences of her lies. She chose to cooperate, and we spent the next several months working together to untangle the mess we had both created through our actions. It was a long and difficult process that required countless phone calls, paperwork, and proof of fraud that consumed our lives. We had to work with credit reporting agencies, banks, and loan companies to straighten everything out and restore our identities. The process brought us closer together in an unexpected way, and we had many honest conversations about our relationship and our family dynamics. She admitted that she had always been jealous of me and that she had felt entitled to take what she wanted without thinking about the consequences. I realized that my revenge had been just as destructive as her original crime, and that I had become someone I didn't recognize. We both learned valuable lessons about trust, consequences, and the importance of taking responsibility for our actions and their effects on others. The experience changed our relationship forever, and while we're not as close as we once were, we have a new understanding and respect for each other. Neither of us will ever take our identities or our financial security for granted again, and we've both become more careful about protecting our personal information. During this time, I also had to deal with the emotional aftermath of what I had done to her boyfriend and their relationship. I felt guilty about destroying something that had made her happy, even though I knew he was married and cheating on his wife. The complexity of the situation made me question whether my actions were justified or if I had gone too far in my quest for revenge. I started having nightmares about the whole situation and found myself constantly worrying about whether she would discover the full extent of my revenge. The stress was affecting my work performance and my relationships with friends and family members who had no idea what was going on. I felt like I was living a double life, pretending to be supportive while secretly being the cause of her problems. The guilt became overwhelming when I saw how much weight she had lost and how anxious she had become about everything in her life. She was afraid to check her mail, answer her phone, or even use her credit cards for fear of what new problems she might discover. I realized that my revenge had turned into something much more serious than I had originally intended. I began to wonder if I had become as bad as she was, or maybe even worse, because I had planned and executed my revenge so methodically. The thought that I might be a terrible person kept me awake at night, and I started to question everything about myself and my motivations. I had wanted justice, but I wasn't sure if what I had done could be called justice anymore. The turning point came when she had a panic attack in front of me after receiving another call from a debt collector. She was hyperventilating and couldn't catch her breath, and I had to help her calm down while pretending I had no idea what was causing her distress. Seeing her in such a vulnerable state made me realize that I had pushed things too far and that my revenge had become cruel rather than just. I made the decision to slowly start undoing some of the damage I had caused, beginning with canceling the subscription services and gym memberships that were draining her bank account. I also contacted some of the credit card companies and reported the accounts as fraudulent, which would help her credit score recover more quickly. It was a risk because it meant admitting to my own crimes, but I couldn't continue watching her suffer. The process of repairing both of our credit scores and financial situations took almost a year of constant work and stress. We had to provide documentation, fill out forms, and make countless phone calls to straighten everything out. There were times when we both wanted to give up because the process seemed endless and overwhelming. But working together toward a common goal helped us understand each other better and begin to heal our relationship. We started talking more openly about our feelings and our childhood, and I began to understand why she had felt the need to steal from me. She had always felt like she was living in my shadow, and that she had to compete with me for our parents' attention and approval. I also learned that her financial problems had been worse than I had realized, and that she had been struggling to pay her bills for months before she decided to steal my identity. She had been too proud to ask for help and too scared to admit that she was in trouble. Her desperation had driven her to make a terrible decision that had consequences for both of us. As we worked through the legal and financial aspects of our situation, we also had to deal with the emotional damage that had been done to our family relationships. Our parents were devastated when they learned what had happened, and they struggled to understand how both of their daughters had made such poor choices. The family dynamics that had existed for years were suddenly called into question, and we all had to examine our roles in creating the situation. The whole ordeal taught me that revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it often creates more problems than it solves and can destroy relationships that took years to build. If I had to do it over again, I might have chosen a different path. But I can't say I regret standing up for myself and making her face the consequences of her actions. The experience changed both of us in ways that we're still discovering. And while our relationship will never be the same, we've both grown as people and learned valuable lessons about forgiveness, accountability, and the true cost of revenge.